Aha! I got you now, you dirty bastard. Hand me my rifle, John. Sir, the bear is dead. It's pretending. Sir, the bear has been dead since 1991. Can't you read the sign? You calling me a stupid American, John? No, sir, but the crows... Eyes on the bear, soldier. Sir, the crows are destroying the corn. Are those Russian crows? No, sir. Then drop it, John. One more word about the crows and I'll feed you to the bear. You see, that conversation was actually happening every day for 10 years inside the actual U.S. government before 9/11. The bear was Russia. The crows were Al-Qaeda. And the man trying to get Uncle Sam to look at the crows was an agent named John O'Neill. On the day they finally told him to stop looking at the crows, John had 19 days to live. Because what happened 19 days later? The biggest tragedy in American history happened on top of him. To understand how he ended up there, we have to rewind about 11 years. Because before there was a 9/11, there was a 1993. And guess who already predicted 9/11 by then, but got told to shut up? A younger, posher version of the same John O'Neill, working for the FBI. And the fact that he was more posh than the average wannabe spy created some complications. John, why are you like this? Like what? Your suits cost more than my car. You drink whiskey at 10 a.m. And don't get me started on your nails. Hey, what's wrong with my nails? But it wasn't just his appearance that made him different. The thing was, while every other agent at the FBI was watching Russia, O'Neill was watching one specific Saudi millionaire nobody else had ever heard of. His name is Osama bin Laden, Saudi millionaire. I believe he's going to hit us. You mean this guy on a horse? Yes. He fought the Soviets, John, same side as us. He's turned. Russia has 30,000 nukes. He has a horse. His network is a horse, John. But, oh, shut up, John. Don't you have nails to polish? So the FBI went back to watching Russia, while the horse guy, despite owning a fortune from his family's construction company that helped build Saudi Arabia, kept expanding his influence and power in the caves of Afghanistan. But on the other side of the US, at exactly the same moment, a second person was doing the same thing as O'Neill. And no, I'm not talking about polishing his nails. The British veteran Rick Rescorla was also looking at a threat nobody else was looking at, and also being told to shut up about it. Once a Vietnam War hero, by 1990 he was working as head of corporate security at Morgan Stanley, whose offices took up a significant part of the South Tower of the World Trade Center. Rescorla's job was basically to make sure nobody attacked the building. He had just one problem. Similar to when your parents can't get through to you when a new Fortnite expansion launches, Rescorla felt Morgan Stanley only really cared about looking at stock charts. I drove a car into your basement parking garage this morning. It was unguarded. A truck full of explosives could collapse the tower and kill thousands of people. Not everyone can have a good day, Rick. Hey, did you see Microsoft today? What? Up 4%. I just made $2 million. So Rescorla walked back to his office. He pulled out a map of the World Trade Center. He marked the exact spot where a truck bomb would do the most damage. He wrote a full security report, and he placed it gently on top of the stack of other security reports the Morgan Stanley CEO was definitely going to read. 3 years later, on February 26, 1993, a van full of explosives exploded in the basement parking garage of the World Trade Center, 30 feet from where Rescorla had predicted. 6 people died. The towers were supposed to come down on each other. They didn't. One of the bombers, a man named Ramzi Youssef, escaped to Pakistan. His partner did something else. Hi, I'd like my $400 deposit refund for a stolen car, please. Sure thing, sir. Just need your name. Mohammed Salame. Mohammed Salame. As in the man whose name was on the rental agreement for the truck that just blew up the World Trade Center? Is that a problem? One moment, please. Are you calling about my refund, sir? Yes, it's definitely not the police I'm calling. The police got him, and the system held this time. America exhaled. In the South Tower, Rick Rescorla sat down and wrote a second report. The next attack, he said, would not come from the basement. It would come from the air. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, the escaped bomber, Ramzi Youssef, was already designing a second attempt. However, he wasn't doing it alone. His uncle was helping him, and his uncle had bigger plans. The uncle's name was Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. You'd think the architect of the worst attack in American history would be a wild man in a cave, or a religious cleric, or maybe looks like the bully in your kindergarten. He wasn't any of those. In 1986, he graduated with a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from North Carolina A&T State University. Hi, America. I'd like to study mechanical engineering at one of your universities, please. Welcome. Here's your degree. Thank you. I will use this knowledge to design a major attack on you in approximately 15 years. See ya. What did you say? I said I was going to use my degree to save puppies. I love puppies. After his time in the US, he went home to Kuwait and started thinking about how he could attack America in a way no one had seen before. He had an idea. So in 1996, he flew to Afghanistan to get to a cave in the mountains. Inside the cave was Osama bin Laden. Yes, the same horse guy from before. Ready to hear that ambitious plan. I have a plan. Okay. 10 planes. 10? 5 targets per coast. World Trade Center, Pentagon, Sears Tower, US Bank Tower, Capitol. That's a lot. I'm piloting the 10th one. You're piloting it? I kill every man on board, I land the plane, I give speech, then I release the women and children as a sign of mercy. Get this crazy man out of my cave, and then let's continue the discussion about the use of horses instead of planes. Oh. So bin Laden said no, too many question marks, but he didn't say never. 3 years passed, KSM did not give up on his pitch. He refined it, made it tighter, cut the locations, cut the personally flying the 10th plane part, cut the releasing the women and children part. By 1999, he had a new version to show bin Laden. This time, it was 4 targets and 4 planes with 4 trained pilots. Despite no horses involved in the plan, Khalid got the green light. Operation 9/11 was in progress. The only problem was, where do you find pilots willing to perform such a task? The answer is on the most ordinary place imaginable, a train. In late 1999, 4 young men in Hamburg boarded a train heading west. They were going to fight in another war, in Chechnya. Excuse me, gentlemen, where are you headed? Chechnya. Have you considered not Chechnya? Like where? Afghanistan. What's in Afghanistan? A different war, bigger, cooler, funded by a Saudi billionaire who really hates America. Plus, free flight school. Free flight school? Yes. We love free stuff. By the end of 1999, every piece of 9/11 was in place. The architect, the funder, the plan, the pilots. 2 whole years before the attack. And meanwhile, in New York, John O'Neill kept reading his bin Laden briefings every morning. Nobody was listening. After years of being completely ignored, bin Laden gave John O'Neill some help. In 1998, 2 American embassies in Africa got blown up by Al-Qaeda. In 2000, an American Navy ship in Yemen, the USS Cole, got blown up, also by Al-Qaeda. Suddenly, John O'Neill was the only person in the FBI who'd been talking about Al-Qaeda for years, so the FBI made him lead investigator on both bombings. The Cole investigation took O'Neill to Yemen alongside 300 FBI agents and a unit of Marines, which would have been fine, except no one told the U.S. ambassador, who'd spent years building a relationship with a country that was one bad day away from kicking America out. What a beautifully unspoiled corner of U.S. Yemeni diplomacy I have here. Just me, a garden, a cup of Arabic tea, and a country that, after 2 years of patient work, has finally agreed to tolerate my American existence. The one thing I cannot afford right now is a single American with a gun showing up uninvited. Wait, who are those guys over there? That would be your people. They are absolutely not. They have FBI written on their jackets, madam. Oh no. For reference, total Americans in Yemen the day before O'Neill landed, 42. Day after, enough for a small invasion. 3 months later, when O'Neill tried to come back to finish the investigation, his re-entry visa was denied by the ambassador. And once again, no one was catching Osama bin Laden. Then came strike 2 for O'Neill. In July 2000, he went to a retirement conference in Orlando, Florida. He stepped out of a meeting room for a few minutes. When he came back, his FBI briefcase was gone. Now, here's the thing about the briefcase. It was full of classified counterterrorism documents, the kind a foreign spy would pay millions of dollars to read. But the people who took it weren't spies. They were regular thieves who wanted his rich guy stuff. So they took the pen, the cigar cutter, the lighter. They left every classified document untouched. A few hours later, hotel staff found the briefcase. The papers were still inside. Nothing about national security had been compromised. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. Inside the FBI, O'Neill had enemies. People who didn't like his expensive suits, his shivas at 10 a.m., his habit of being right about Al-Qaeda when nobody else was, and, above all else, his nails. They saw the Orlando incident and they saw a weapon. In August 2001, somebody at the FBI called the New York Times. "I've got something on O'Neill." "I already know. I haven't told you what it is. It will go on the front page." "It's about a briefcase." "Dude," I said, "I know. Your colleague Davis called Tuesday. Cohen called Wednesday. You're third. Damn, why do you guys want this guy gone so badly? He's just, ugh." The story ran August 19, 2001. O'Neill resigned days later. He had already accepted a new position, Director of Security at the World Trade Center. Meanwhile, while all of this was happening to O'Neill, somebody at the very top was getting briefed on the exact thing O'Neill had been predicting for years. On August 6, 2001, the CIA delivered to the President of the United States a critical warning about bin Laden. And now you're thinking, finally, the US takes this seriously. The warning has landed where it needed to. The president got the memo. Even a 5-year-old like you would have grasped the importance. But you forgot one thing. The president was on vacation, a month-long one, at his beloved ranch in Texas. "Mr. President, today's brief. What we got. First, the gold price is up 2 cents. Hot dog. Second, Roy reports a weasel has moved in under the porch. That is a problem. Third, bin Laden is determined to strike the US. Sure, whatever. Now, what's our move on the weasel, Mike? Rifle or trap?" The briefing took 10 minutes. No follow-up happened. The administration was focused on more important priorities. So by mid-August 2001, here's where the world stood. The FBI's best counterterrorism agent had been pushed out 3 weeks before the attack he'd been predicting for years. The president had been told, and nobody was doing anything. So what was the rest of the system doing all summer? The summer of 2001 was full of warnings. The FBI was tracking patterns. The CIA was watching specific people. Flight instructors were calling in tips. The president was being briefed. But each warning ran into the same problem, a system that wasn't built to act on them. There were 3 of them. The first mistake happened on July 10, 2001, when an FBI agent in Phoenix, Arizona named Ken Williams sent a memo to FBI headquarters. The memo described a pattern. Middle Eastern men connected to bin Laden were signing up for U.S. flight schools. Williams asked headquarters to canvass every flight school in the country. He named bin Laden in the document. But at headquarters, the memo ran into 3 problems. 1, Williams had a theory, not a target. No specific names, no specific schools. 2, canvassing every flight school in America would require hundreds of agents. The FBI did not have hundreds of agents to spare. 3, nobody at HQ wanted to own it. The memo was sent to 2 units, the Radical Fundamentalist Unit and the Bin Laden Unit. Neither took action. So headquarters classified it as routine, the same priority as a parking ticket. On August 7, 2001, the memo was officially closed. Therefore, when the 4 pilots of 9/11 were finishing their flight training that summer at flight schools across the country, the FBI was not looking. To understand the second mistake, we have to go back to the early 2000s. In January 2000, the CIA started tracking a man named Khalid al-Midhar. He had attended an al-Qaeda summit in Malaysia. He had a US visa. By spring 2000, he was living openly in San Diego under his own name. The CIA knew all of this. The CIA also believed he was preparing to attack the United States. But there was a wall. In 2001, U.S. counterterrorism law required intelligence operations, CIA and criminal investigations, FBI, to be kept separate. The original purpose was to protect classified intelligence sources from being exposed in court. But the result, by 2001, was that the CIA was actually legally barred from telling the FBI certain things, even about people standing inside the United States. So al-Midhar and his roommate, Nawaf al-Hazmi, who were both on a flight heading towards the Pentagon on the morning of September 11, 2001, were unbothered. The third mistake happened in August 2001 in Eagan, Minnesota, when a man named Zacharias Moussaoui walked into a flight school called Pan Am International Flight Academy. He paid $6,300 in cash. He wanted to learn how to fly a 747. But he didn't want to learn how to take off. He didn't want to learn how to land. He wanted to learn how to fly the plane in the middle. He also asked how the cockpit doors worked. The flight instructor was a man named Clarence Prevost. Prevost was a former Northwest Airlines pilot. He had trained hundreds of students. He knew exactly what a normal student looked like, and this wasn't normal. Prevost figured out that Moussaoui wasn't there to become a pilot, but rather to learn how to fly a plane somewhere and do something terrible with it. So he called the FBI. On August 16, 2001, Moussaoui was arrested on immigration charges. His visa had expired. For once, the FBI did the right thing. There was just one more step. The FBI needed to look in his bag. Inside Moussaoui's possessions were a laptop, a notebook, and a flight school workbook. Inside those were phone numbers, contacts, financial records, and direct links to the Hamburg cell, the 4 young men running the 9/11 plot. But to open the laptop, the FBI agents in Minneapolis needed a special warrant called a FISA warrant, the kind issued only when a suspect can be tied to a foreign government. However, the warrant was denied despite Moussaoui being referred to as a radical Islamic extremist. That, in 2001, was not enough. So while Moussaoui sat in his jail cell, his laptop sat in an evidence locker. The other 19 men, the ones the laptop could have led the FBI to, were still out there, finishing their training, buying their tickets, packing their box cutters. After 9/11, when the FBI finally opened the laptop, they found what they were looking for. But by then, the planes had hit. So by the morning of September 11, 2001, O'Neill had warned the FBI for years, Rescorla had warned Morgan Stanley, the president had been handed a memo with a prediction in its title, the FBI had made 3 mistakes. All of them could have stopped September 11th. None did. 19 men were already at airports. 4 flights were about to take off. It was a Tuesday morning, the kind of clear blue sky forecasters used to call severe clear. Perfect visibility in every direction, no wind, the city quiet, the sun just coming up over the Atlantic. 4 planes took off that morning, all eastbound and all transcontinental, all carrying enough fuel to fly to Los Angeles, all with light passenger loads because the hijackers had picked routes where they wouldn't have to overpower large groups. American Airlines Flight 11 lifted off from Boston at 7:59. United Airlines Flight 175 from Boston at 8:14. American Airlines Flight 77 from Washington Dulles at 8:20. United Airlines Flight 93 from Newark at 8:42. At 8:14 a.m., 15 minutes after takeoff, Flight 11 stopped responding to air traffic control. In the back of the plane, a flight attendant named Betty Ong picked up an airphone from the rear galley and dialed American Airlines reservations. Her voice was completely calm. "Number 3, in the back. The cockpit's not answering. Somebody stabbed in business class, and I think there's mace. We can't breathe." "Where are you, Betty?" "I'm in the back, jump seat 3. Are you part of the flight crew?" I'm the flight attendant. She stayed on the line for 25 straight minutes, giving them everything she could see, the flight number, the seat numbers of the hijackers, what had been used, who had been hurt. She was the first voice on the recording that morning, and she was the calmest person on it. At 8:24 a.m., in the cockpit of Flight 11, the lead hijacker reached for the radio to speak to the cabin and pressed the wrong button. His voice went out instead to Boston Air Traffic Control, 4 words that air controllers would still be playing back in their heads 20 years later. We have some planes? By the time anyone fully understood what those 4 words meant, it was 8:46:30, and Flight 11 was hitting the North Tower of the World Trade Center at 466 miles per hour. 17 minutes later, at 9:03, Flight 175 hit the South Tower, and 34 minutes after that, at 9:37, Flight 77 hit the Pentagon. At Langley Air Force Base in Virginia, 2 F-16 fighter jets were scrambled to defend Washington, and what they did was climb, bank east, and fly out over the Atlantic Ocean, because that was their training pattern. For 50 years, Langley's F-16s had practiced intercepting Soviet bombers coming in from the Atlantic, and the pilots that morning hadn't been briefed on what was actually happening in New York. So when they took off, they did what they had always done. They flew toward the wrong ocean. By the time anyone reached them and explained, Flight 77 was already inside the Pentagon. And what about Flight 93? The passengers had been on the airphones calling their families on the ground, and the families had been telling them what had happened in New York and at the Pentagon. So the passengers understood what their plane was about to do, and they decided together to storm the cockpit. They never reached the cockpit door. The hijackers, realizing they were losing control, rolled the plane deliberately and crashed it into a field outside Shanksville, Pennsylvania at 10:03 a.m. But what happened to our 2 prophets, Rick Rescorla and John O'Neill? Inside the South Tower of the World Trade Center on the 44th floor, Rick Rescorla saw the North Tower get hit at 8:46 and immediately picked up a bullhorn. The Port Authority announcement system was, at that exact moment, telling everyone in the South Tower to stay at their desks. The building was safe, it said. There was no need to evacuate. Rescorla ignored it. He had drilled Morgan Stanley's 2,700 employees twice a year, every year, for 11 years. He had drilled them on exactly this scenario, and he knew every stairwell, every choke point, every length of time it would take to get the building empty. During the evacuation, his wife Susan called him from home. "Rick, stop crying. I have to get these people out safely. Please. If something should happen to me, I want you to know, I've never been happier. You made my life." He was last seen on the 10th floor. He was going up. The South Tower collapsed at 9:59 a.m., all 110 floors of it coming down in 10 seconds. Of the 27,000 Morgan Stanley employees who had been in the building when the morning began, 2,687 lived. Rick Rescorla's body was never found. In the lobby of the North Tower, John O'Neill, 19 days into his new job as Director of Security, had already evacuated the building once that morning. He went back in and walked toward the connecting tunnel between the lobbies of the North and South Towers. The North Tower collapsed at 10:28 a.m. It came down in 11 seconds. O'Neill's body was found in the rubble 10 days later. 2 skyscrapers, 110 stories each, were gone in 21 seconds. 2,977 people died that morning. The why would not arrive for almost 3 years. When the numbers came in almost 3 years after the morning, they were obscene. The total operational cost to Al-Qaeda for September 11th was somewhere between $400,000 and $500,000. The U.S. defense budget that fiscal year was above $300 billion, a ratio of 1 to a million. In the years that followed, the United States would spend $6.4 trillion on wars that came after. For 50 years between 1947 and 1989, America had been building one giant machine to fight one specific enemy, the Soviet Union. Then, in 1991, that enemy disappeared. The machine was still there, it just didn't have anything to do anymore. So when Al-Qaeda emerged in the 1990s, a stateless network of a few hundred operatives using commercial planes and tourist visas, every institution that should have caught them was structurally pointed in the wrong direction. In March 2003, Pakistani forces and the CIA raided a safe house in Rawalpindi, Pakistan, and arrested Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the architect of 9/11, the same man bin Laden's security had once dragged out of a cave for being too ambitious. When they searched the safe house, they found his laptop. On the laptop was every document related to 9/11, code names of all 4 flights, target assignments, pilot biographies, scans of all 19 hijackers' passports, 3 personal letters from bin Laden, financial spreadsheets, the complete blueprint of the most secretive terror operation in modern history. The system that had spent 50 years tracking nuclear submarines and intercontinental missiles had missed an engineer with a Dell laptop. A year after that, on March 24, 2004, a man named Richard Clark testified in front of the 9/11 Commission. Clark was the man who had been screaming inside the White House about Al-Qaeda since the late 1990s. He had run counterterrorism for both Bill Clinton and George W. Bush. He had been the connecting voice between everyone: O'Neill, the CIA, the agencies, the president. Now, in front of cameras and in front of the families of the dead in the audience, he turned to face them, and he said, "Your government failed you. Those entrusted with protecting you failed you. And I failed you. We tried hard, but that doesn't matter because we failed." That was the official verdict. But the deeper one was something Clark didn't have to say out loud because the script had been walking the audience through it for the last hour. The verdict isn't "we couldn't have known." It's the people who knew were not the people in charge. On the morning of September 11, 2001, the only 2 people who had been right about all of this, the British infantryman in the South Tower and the FBI agent in the North Tower, walked into 2 stairwells. Neither of them came out.